In 2002, Angel Studios were purchased by Rockstar Games after their positive partnership in the racing genre, and their interest with a cancelled spaghetti western project they conceived with Capcom called Red Dead Revolver, they revived and released it in 2004. Although not the greatest title made by Rockstar, the Hauser brothers saw potential in the western genre, because with the 7th generation looming, they announced Old West Project another year later. In the meantime, the rest of the company were busy making other video game titles between the 6th and 7th generations, including Grand Theft Auto, Bully, Midnight Club, Manhunt, The Warriors, and by the turn of the decade, the Old West Project, aka Red Dead Redemption, was released in 2010. And I like it so much that for this review, I played it again for the occasion. It's one of the best Rockstar have ever made, with some believing it excels any Grand Theft Auto title, which meant a follow-up sounded like a no-brainer. However, it also became a turning point for Rockstar Games after the Spouses Against Rockstar San Diego open letter, which accused the publisher of working them to death with endless mandatory overtime, convincing them to change the way they make their games by using all 9 subsidiaries around the world with nearly 2,000 developers working together on one giant project. That was Red Dead Redemption 2. Development began right after the release of its predecessor, but the first few years was simply developing the themes, concepts, and getting a basic grasp of what kind of story the bigwigs of Rockstar wanted to tell, because they were also busy getting Max Payne 3 and Grand Theft Auto 5 off the line. A prequel sounded like the obvious choice. The main protagonist, John Marston, always kept mentioning his former gang, how Dutch brought him in, and how he and the rest of the members were a family to him, but also how they left him to die, to his transition from outlaw to farmer being forced by the government to hunt down the last surviving members. Therefore, the writers already had a lot to work with.
Ow! Oh, oh!
Careful not to work yourself to death there, Uncle.
I was thinking.
Yeah, does it pay well?
Oh, eventually.
The real challenge was making the player feel the same way about Dutch's gang. Like, you're part of the family full of people with their own strengths and weaknesses, because you're always with them. This meant a ton of unique dialogue and insane levels of character development, on top of breaking new ground in all other aspects. Map building, graphics, player movement, and management.
In these books, life seems so simple, but in reality, I can't make head nor tail of it.
By the time the full script was complete, including the story, missions, characters, things to do, the lot, according to Dan Hauser, it was estimated to be around 8 feet tall, with 300,000 different animations and 500,000 lines of dialogue, recorded by 1,200 actors. In fact, the final size of the game for the PlayStation 4 version is 90 gigabytes before updates, and requires one dual-layered Blu-ray disc to install and another to run it. Numbers and facts that won't be topped anytime soon. Unbelievable. On October 2016, after years of endless development and rumors, Rockstar websites posted an image that anyone with half a brain knew exactly what it meant. A follow-up to Red Dead Redemption. And a few days later, they released a trailer showing parts of the map in a shinier coat of 8th generation paint. I have to admit, it's so weird watching these subsequent ones after beating the game knowing all these moments, but back then, this looked too good to be true. It was originally scheduled for a fall 2017 release, but was delayed several times for obvious reasons. Because a game of this magnitude, even with nearly 2,000 people working on it, all you could think about is the list of everything that could go wrong. For example, the city of New Bordeaux had to be changed to Saint Denis after the original name was already used for Mafia 3, and you can't just change the name on the map. You need to change the dialogue, re-record it, the facial animations, the names of the shops, etc. And that takes a lot of work for something that sounds so simple on the surface. If one feature doesn't work, it could affect the other and potentially create a chain reaction of new issues that take forever to fix and test. As you can see from these quotes, the Hauser brothers were perfectionists about that sort of thing. The developers frequently retooled, rewritten, re-recorded over the next decade because it had to be faultless.
Every plan is a good plan if we execute it properly. Every problem we had was because we did not execute properly.
And this brings us to the working conditions during development. A couple of weeks before the game was scheduled to be released, Dan Houser said in an interview that developers had a few stretches where they worked 100 hours per week. I don't know why he would say that, because this provoked heavy criticism, with many users and sources accusing Rockstar of continuing old habits after the spouse's letter controversy. He would clarify a couple of days later that it was only a few select senior staff that worked those hours, and that nobody was forced to work overtime, but things only got worse when other Rockstar employees across all subsidiaries anonymously came out saying they were forced to work overtime, and that it lasted months, even a year for some, with the Lincoln branch reportedly experiencing the worst of it. Some employees said everything was fine, while others called it a culture of fear that affected relationships and their mental and physical health. But one thing's for sure, it was an incredible development that eerily sounds similar to the game's story, and what made it particularly questionable was forced overtime not being paid for, since employees signed waivers and instead received bonuses from sales, hoping the game would be a success. And because Rockstar were coming off the heels of the first Red Dead Redemption, which sold 14 million copies, and Grand Theft Auto 5, which sold over 100 million, developers would have been inclined to take that risk. But even if they did eventually get taken care of financially, seeing that Red Dead Redemption 2 has sold over 25 million copies in a year, there are some things you can't put a price on. Time with family and friends, getting fresh air, going to places, things like that to clear your mind. Maybe there are some who like the challenge and can deal with it, but for others, that's no way to live, and is certainly one of the most controversial moments of 2018, leaving a dark cloud on Red Dead Redemption 2 and the publisher as a whole, even more so than a decade ago if this isn't the first time they got in trouble for it. It was so bad that Rockstar management almost immediately made overtime optional for a lot of the subsidiaries, with the most recent revelation coming in August 2019, with Rockstar Lincoln reportedly having full-time contracts working for them, and that overtime only happened one weekend throughout the whole year, which was completely optional. However, when the time comes to release another new giant hit in the future, the question is, will they stay true to those conditions through thick and thin? And will overtime be optional and compensated for?
Well, that could have gone smoother.
That'll be on my gravestone.
But they were able to find the light at the end of the tunnel, and eventually released Red Dead Redemption 2 worldwide on October 26, 2018 for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and as of this video, is yet to be released for the PC on November 5th, 2019. Now don't get me wrong, I was really looking forward to Red Dead Redemption 2 the second it was announced, but I didn't dive deep into the facts as much as GTA 5, so I wasn't as hyped. Maybe because by that point, all I was thinking about was this channel and university, and nor am I as interested in brand new games these days. However, I did say in a video detailing what the plans were going to be over the last year, directly quoting, "You best bet I'm going to review Red Dead Redemption 2, but first I wanted to travel back to where it all began, Red Dead Revolver."
And miss all this glamour. You must be joking.
Then eventually around the middle of this year I got a copy, and while I was busy working on other reviews, it took me 4 months to complete the story. I wanted to take my time and do it right, because with 600 lines of notes before I even started to write the script, for ages I was thinking, how am I going to review this game? The length of the video speaks for itself. So again, I'll only be talking about the story mode, because Red Dead Online is big enough to have its own video. Now that I've got that out of the way, let's look at Red Dead Redemption 2 as a video game.
Gentlemen, it's time.
Now, if you play the first Red Dead Redemption and you enter Blackwater, which is the most developed town on the map, it feels quite deserted, and there's a good reason for it. 10 years ago, the town became a war zone caused by Dutch Van der Linde's gang, and hasn't been able to recover from it. According to Arthur Morgan, the Van der Linde gang attempted to rob a bank with a take of 150k, but law forces were too much to handle, which ended in a massacre where plenty of gang members, police, and innocent civilians were killed, putting the whole map of New Austin on lockdown, and setting the stage for Red Dead Redemption 2.
Arthur! Any luck? I found a place where we can get some shelter.
The last surviving members flee to the snowy North Mountains of Grizzly's West to stay alive and lay low, away from the law. Dutch, realizing that the Old West was dying, has a plan to pull off one last big score to get everybody out and live the rest of their lives in peace.
One big score down here, Arthur, and we disappear. We are almost heading home.
And this creates an endless chain of relocations, allying with influential figures, leaders, and fighting with rival gang members and agents who are persistently trying to hunt down Dutch after what happened in Blackwater.
What did I do to him? I
guess he thinks he's the king around here. He don't want the likes of you.
Meanwhile, Arthur Morgan becomes doubtful of Dutch's motivations and psyche as time passes, and also begins to question the choices he made in his life, living up to the word redemption in the game's title. Everybody has their role, and at the end of the day, it's all about survival in the dying West.
Things have been tough. There ain't no doubt about that. Trust me. I am gonna get us out of here.
Yeah, that pretty much fits John Marston's descriptions in the predecessor, and that was something that always stood out. I love stories in video games, movies, and TV shows that give you that sense of mystery, leaving it up to the player's imagination as you slowly try to find these former gang members. And keep in mind there were no plans for a prequel in advance.
I guess the Dutch Vanderlyn Finishing School has some strange graduates.
That it does.
But that's why it can be a risky move. They can either take away that mystery because if you've played the first game you already know the fate of the Vanderlyn gang down the line, or it could be that it has the kind of backstory that would be fascinating enough to make a full game of, allowing for these type of scenarios and extra character development, so that you can play either of these two in any order without feeling like too much information is given away. Fortunately, it easily falls under the latter, because this is one of the best video game narratives I've played through in a long time. In fact, it's the best thing about this whole game. And even if there's anything wrong, firstly I'll get to that. Secondly, my respect for these characters is enough to always persevere.
I possess things that you will never understand.
The story is about the influence of Dutch Vanderlyn, and why members are so drawn to him as a leader, because I knew he was one of the main antagonists of the first Red Dead Redemption, so I was always curious as to how this game was going to portray him, because occasionally John spoke good things about him too.
The leader of the gang taught me how to read, taught me how to see all that was good in the world. He was a great man in a way.
Now, I don't expect you to understand this, but I have never been more proud of you than I am right now.
Maybe the gang members just like the fact that he always says the word plan.
Do you have my back?
Always, Dutch.
It portrays him in a way that the pressure is getting to him. But because this game takes forever to beat, it's a long story where the characters change without even noticing. Like there isn't a certain moment when it clicks, at least on the first playthrough. Not just Dutch, but all the members at the camp. I reloaded one of my older save files after beating this to find other things to do, and wow, it felt like a lot had changed by that point. It was certainly weird hearing John screaming for help the first time you see him in this game.
That's quite a scratch you got there.
There was a bit of that in GTA 5, like Michael's family getting along better towards the end, but between these three, things barely changed apart from being a lot richer. That's why switching between multiple protagonists was unnecessary in Red Dead Redemption 2. You're spending at least a quarter of the game in these camps, therefore spending at least a quarter of the game with these characters, interacting with each other all the time, so you're inclined to explore it for yourself because they're so likable.
And we each got $15. Oh, and a quarter. Don't forget the quarter.
Shut up, Arthur.
All of this makes Arthur Morgan, the character you play as, look like the generic peacekeeper in comparison. I mean, he is second in command to Dutch, so it makes sense. But eventually, with a few missions that relate mostly to him, you'll see that he's more than that.
You're not a very nice woman, Mrs. Lynn.
Well, look at the company I keep.
I know, it's quite dreadful, isn't it?
And that's because his personality is up to you. Instead of honor affecting how much things cost across the map like the first Red Dead Redemption, it plays a heavy role in the story. Whatever fate you choose for Arthur, there are plenty of moments throughout the game that are a test of morals, whether it's the way you talk to people, doing favors, sparing, killing people, and these affect the tiniest yet effective pieces of dialogue in the cutscenes.
You got a family. You need cash. You need to start building a life for yourself. Me? I need a vacation.
Now, I thought the unique dialogue in GTA 4 was impressive. There was a different conversation during missions, hangouts, or a certain way a mission is failed triggers a unique phone call. But Red Dead Redemption 2 is on another level. With honor, you can be friendly, you can be nasty to the point of getting others telling you to shut up.
That's enough!
Get into this, please.
You can be a bit of both, you can do it while drunk, the dialogue is unique depending on the situation he's in. It's not as complicated as I feared when watching the gameplay trailers, pick good or bad, but it beggars belief that Rockstar were able to put it all together so flawlessly.
Everyone's favorite uncle. At least say it like you mean it.
Hello. Is that better?
Sorry. I'll stop messing with you now.
Yeah, I forgot he had lumbago. Besides, I chose the High Honor route for this review because I just can't bring myself to being a jerk to the camp members. John, Abigail, Sadie, Hosea, Charles, Lenny. I like them all too much to do that. Well, almost all of them. He's looking at you, Micah.
But we both know underneath, you're yellow as hell.
You need to back off.
It stinks of coward right around here.
To avoid spoiling the plot too much, all I'm gonna say about him is that he's on the level of Frank Tenpenny, Gary Smith, Dmitry Rascalov, and Edgar Ross. That typical villain that you love to see his head on a pike.
I ain't the bad guy you think I am, Arthur. But I am a survivor. Stick with me and you'll live.
But even with the ones I don't like the right way. He's an excellent villain, and so is Andrew Milton.
You're making a big mistake. All of you will die. Run away from this place, you fools! Run!
Although they did their best to differ between both sides of the moral spectrum, the plot feels more tailored to the High Honor based on Arthur's intentions, whereas the Low Honor feels like the option for reasons other than the story, which isn't a bad thing, because some of the insults are absolutely savage when antagonizing. You can't help but laugh.
I wish you'd stayed at sea
Don't, Arthur, come on.
with the other walruses.
So I do encourage beating this game on both sides of the honor scale. Don't forget that you're playing a Rockstar open world game where you can be whatever you want. After playing the predecessor for this review, it felt like a different experience seeing these members interact with each other again after a decade had passed. It felt a bit more powerful, and it gives you a clear idea of just how developed John's backstories are in this game. Whenever he mentions anything from his past gang life, I can instantly remember those moments and those descriptions of the members that are spot on.
They left me, I left them.
Oh, that's how it goes.
As far as I'm concerned, there are no continuity errors to report.
When the time comes, you gotta run and don't look back.
It's hard to explain without spoiling it for anyone who's watching this and hasn't completed the story yet, but take my word for it. I haven't come across writing this well thought out and superbly acted by everybody involved in a long time. And even if you know from the beginning that it's not exactly going to be a feel-good story, but then what is in a Rockstar game? It's certainly a max level compelling one that you can't stop playing to the end. It's an incredible narrative. If I have a criticism, I guess there are plenty of story traits taken from other Rockstar games, but only because I found it more noticeable after reviewing a high volume of them over the last couple of years.
Feels like things have changed. The whole world's changed. They don't want folk like us no more. We're being hunted.
We are smarter than them. Only the feeblest of men take jobs in the government.
I hope so.
Normally with most of these games, everything begins with map design, and the developers aren't just flying to the city to study buildings and road placements, but also the history, the people that live there, the conditions, and that leads to the creation of the characters, story, and gameplay. But because Red Dead Redemption 2 is a direct prequel set over a century earlier with a lot of backstory and style already in place, they had a decent head start before they even considered the idea, but they needed to make a new map, and they couldn't just travel back in time to take photos and videos like they usually would with most projects. Then again, it wouldn't surprise me if Rockstar have a time machine hidden in their secret offices in New York. So what the art team did instead was genius. Although longtime art director Aaron Garbett states otherwise, they took inspiration from landscape paintings by artists over a century ago, including Albert Bierstadt, sorry I can't pronounce it, Frank Johnson, and Charlie Russell, to name a few.
Look at all that snow on the mountains. Sure don't want to be back up there.
For reasons I'll get to. They wanted to utilize the lighting and colors onto certain parts of the map, the way the clouds override the sun. Like if you take a snapshot and give it a paintbrush effect on Adobe Illustrator, it might as well be one of those 19th century paintings. And it even creates some of the moments and subplots for the narrative, like Cuba, the Native American Civil War, and constantly moving and settling in like the Oregon Trial.
Would you just look around you? This world has its consolations.
That's not to say this game doesn't have any pop culture references, because they're endless here, but they've been substituted to Easter eggs, which honestly relate less to the Western genre and more to Rockstar's unsurprising sense of humor, including UFOs, ghost trains, Man Bear Pig, and other Rockstar titles to name a few.
What's your name?
Aiden O'Malley.
Is that so?
as well as nods to real-life history. Like the first Red Dead Redemption, it's set during a period when the Old West was dying, and is slowly but noticeably transitioning into urban frontier territory, with government agents not playing around, Dutchess trying to move on with one more score, the sort of places and situations that would never fit in something like Red Dead Revolver. But it still has the romance, the honor, the nobility. Who am I kidding? It's just people killing each other. You're right, Professor McDougal.
I'm gonna hand you over to him and watch him tear you limb from limb. What? I'm just kidding.
Point is that it's set during a turning point of American history, and the final result looks, well, I shouldn't have to say anything else. It looks about as good as video games can get. No wonder it requires 2 dual-layered Blu-rays to play this game.
Big cities, they're always repellent. Exactly.
It's hard to tell whether it's the biggest map Rockstar have created, because these franchises are 2 different timelines that have their own way of immersing you into the virtual world they have prepared for you. However, one big advantage Red Dead Redemption 2 has over GTA 5 is because it's set over a century ago, towns and cities aren't as big in scale, therefore the areas aren't as compressed, which make the map feel less restricted, relying more on snow, mountains, caves, forests, green grass, swamps, and deserts, with more wildlife than I can keep up with since your main safe houses are camped frequently relocating, and when you walk into town, there's a higher volume of non-playable characters and activity on screen, with barely any technical mishaps like frame rate drops, slowdown, or glitches, and a lot of the little details that if they didn't appear we might not have cared, but because they do, it further adds to the high quality of this map. Like when you start a fire near wood, it'll burn the whole structure down. The tempo of the soundtrack changes depending on where you are and what you're doing. An epic soundtrack composed by Woody Jackson, by the way. And there was one moment in a cutscene where you're told to move slowly or items fall out, and a rocky road did exactly that a few minutes later, with John saying that couldn't have been good. I might have said once that the 8th generation isn't much of a step forward graphically compared to previous ones, but as you can see between these 2, I think this game proves me wrong. It's amazing that the game engine used to power both began life as a table tennis title, and it's so expertly crafted accordingly that by the time you've completed the story, as you can see, almost all of it has been explored, which is something that all open world maps designed by Rockstar strive for, making the map huge, but not for the sake of being huge, especially if they brought back New Austin from Red Dead Redemption, just without the snowy mountain in Mexico. Now obviously you can't go back there as Arthur, and nor can you use a tank or helicopter if you're desperate.
Seems you stirred up quite a hornet's nest in Blackwater.
So I keep hearing.
But we do need to know how John Marston got his couch in Beach's Hope after life in Dutch's gang, so eventually it's unlocked. And let me tell all of you right now, when I walked into Blackwater with that outfit and the music playing in the background, it was beautiful. I didn't think a video game of this era could make me feel this emotional based on memories of its predecessor, but it did. Of course, this part of the map isn't utilized the same way as the rest of the territories, presumably encouraging players to go back to the first Red Dead Redemption for that, which surprises me given how much effort it would have taken to redesign everything, and all the other little stories like the outbreak of Armadillo and Tumbleweed before it was a ghost town, but that's all there is to those places. Otherwise, there never seems to be a moment that doesn't look breathtaking. No matter where you are, what time of day, the outfit you're wearing, the situation you're in, it looks stunning visually. When I entered this world for the first time, I thought it would be unreviewable. Like I almost guarantee there'll be some features that'll slip my mind, because the sheer size of the map and what you can do with it is unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Welcome home, all of you, to my humble abode. We got fine living. Ignore the corpses and the alligators, it's paradise. I love it.
The campsite is what Heist are to GTA 5, one of the biggest key features of Red Dead Redemption 2. The thing the developers talk about the most, the core part of the gameplay that sticks with you throughout the whole story, and affects certain mechanics. There are no purchasable safe houses, everything you need is in your wagon, and with the threat of the Pinkertons and O'Driscolls present, you're always relocating, which is a good way to explore different parts of this incredible map, since the story is broken down into chapters where you're dealing with one powerful figure to another.
So it is time for everyone to get to work.
Get to work, but stay out of trouble.
Like character development, everything here is organized with each member having their own role, whether it's cooking the food, feeding the animals, patrolling the perimeter, and these actions change depending on the time of day. They'll do their jobs in the afternoon, hang out near the campfires at night, sometimes sing songs, and go to sleep till morning. Some of the stuff you can do yourself, but to be honest, I didn't even notice until literally the end of the game, and I'm glad I didn't because these are extremely tedious tasks that are honestly not worth wasting time on, unless you really like the Deadeye ability. All they do is motivate you to switch off the game and do tasks in your own home. That's how boring they are.
Well, we all need to do our share.
Fortunately, there are other more exciting ways to help contribute to the camp that are structured like activities from previous Rockstar games. But obviously the missions are what drive the story and earn the most money. Doing whatever Dutch's plan sees fit. Raiding towns, their core operations, and trying to escape while shooting anyone who follows.
I had a plan. I still have a plan.
But seriously, most of these missions are epic. And funny too, particularly when set in a saloon.
For the next 30 minutes, the drinks in this here bar, in this here town, are entirely free!
Though they become noticeably predictable in the last couple of chapters. And if you want to get all the gold medals, be my guest, because I've heard it's one of the most excruciating things you can do in a video game.
Whatever it is that you find, the camp gets its slice.
Everything is done to keep supply levels in check, with a collection box to donate money and items to restock and purchase supplies and upgrades for the camp. I found that a lot of it wasn't that necessary apart from the fast travel, but it uses the power of likable characters as motivation since supply levels affect camp morale, and they'll let you know if you're not doing your share.
Thank God somebody's doing some work around here.
You got me, Rockstar. The features of Arthur's wagon include a bed for advancing time, collecting mail, and managing all the customization options available like outfits, equipment, and facial haircuts, which has greatly expanded from its predecessor.
Are we still doing that?
Of course! We're going to fix you up so fine no one will notice a thing.
For starters, hair grows naturally, so if you want to go for the Kurt Russell look, you can't just go to the hairdresser and magically change it. You need to wait.
Well, very good, sir.
No, it's not good. Not good at all.
I was expecting GTA 5 to do something like that back in 2013, but I guess people were just happy to have so many customization options after the disappointment of GTA 4. And there are hundreds of hats, vests, coats, suspenders, pants, boots, gloves, bandoliers, and all of it can be worn at the same time with plenty of colors, shapes, and sizes to choose from, with a few hidden ones to find and unlock. Maybe not as many options as GTA 5, but more than makes up for it with the variety. And in case you're wondering, yes, John Marston in the epilogue has all these options too. Plus, if you enjoy the hunting aspect of this game, there are crafting stations even in the camp to make additional outfits with the animals. Now, I'm usually OCD about that sort of thing when recording gameplay footage, making sure the outfits the characters wear work with where they are at a certain time of day. And now it's a requirement because clothing affects body temperature. Stats are an even more prominent aspect of this game than any other Rockstar predecessor, because it relates mostly to how Arthur is currently feeling, and trying to maintain an even balance. Thanks to the amazing graphics, you can guess the temperature of where you're standing just by looking at your surroundings. However, during missions, sometimes you don't know where you're riding to, so you could be following someone to the top of the mountain just with a shirt and vest. Suddenly, core health and stamina starts to go down. Even standing too close to a fire has the same effect. And when it comes to weight, again, a neat idea that certainly belongs in this game. You keep it in check by eating a certain amount of food from the camp, saloons, and hunting, where you can use the campfires to cook meat and include extra ingredients which temporarily affect your stats. The only other video game that has something similar is Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, but that was more straightforward even by 2004 standards. Eat 5 large fast food meals whenever the fat meter goes down fast, then you don't have to worry about it again for the next few days. With most video games, food is used for the sole purpose of replenishing your health, but Red Dead Redemption 2 is more realistic, meaning you need to keep eating consistently with a breakfast, lunch, and dinner-like routine to avoid turning into a stick insect. And while there are plenty of places to obtain food, if this game takes over 40 hours to beat, eventually it becomes tedious, which is why Arthur was underweight for most of this playthrough. I'm just saying, don't get complacent.
We have a few cans of food and a rabbit. For what?
10, 12 people?
I think they could have been a bit more lenient here since time advances faster than 24 hours in real time. Sure, it won't kill you and you can always replenish core stats with sleep, but not managing yourself properly genuinely makes the missions more aggravating. Even horses have a similar setup, which is fortunately more straightforward.
Hey! Get a hold of that horse, will you?
Just feed it every once in a while, clean it if it's dirty, pat it, and hitch whenever you stop. Did I mention they can be customized too? Yeah, the map has stables where not only can you buy and store horses, but also change the fur color, styles, purchase equipment like saddles, horns, blankets, etc.
You got yourself a deal. And a fine new horse.
I hope so.
Well, I don't sell anything other than good animals.
It's a similar story with weapons. You maintain them by cleaning after heavy usage, which is just as straightforward, and they can be customized to look like they're a couple of decades into the future. Not exactly detailed like Midnight Club, but even compared to something like GTA 5, you have a lot of options to choose from. And you can also purchase special ammo, and use a campfire to craft it yourself.
Yeah, we're gonna need ammunition, guns, look real frightening, and some dynamite to open up the train.
I'll get the supplies.
With everything you can buy in this game, because you're not exactly earning ridiculous amounts of money, it's hard to become tempted, because even when you eventually do, you would have beaten the game by then, so it isn't as useful, though it does make the shooting mechanics more manageable.
Come on, take your best shot, please.
Grow up.
I went into this game having played the first Red Dead Redemption almost the moment it came out in 2010, and a lot of the basic control commands like the way you take cover, cycle weapons, and slow down time were a step up from GTA 4. But comparing it to its successor, it has more fluent animations which make controlling Arthur feel heavier. Like each minute would take a few seconds longer to clear enemies, but since gunplay is always intense you barely notice.
Let's get out of here! Keep moving, Arthur! Goddamn maniac! Should have left you to hang.
We're in it now, Morgan. What do you want to do?
Arthur also has a few extra tricks up his sleeve. He can Eagle Eye, which allows him to track animal prints similar to The Last of Us. Items can be accessed quickly in the weapons wheel, and there's an optional first-person view like GTA 5, although I stuck with the third person for most of the playthrough, and also the cinematic view if you can't be bothered controlling the horse while riding with someone. Anyway, if this is your preference in GTA 5, it's no better or worse here. I also love the increased emphasis on stealth during missions, especially when following another member. The multiple choice options in missions are similar to GTA 5, only you select them on the fly, and nor do they affect how much money you earn.
Alright, let's go.
Maybe I should focus on the stealth genre once the open world one dries up, and the melee controls have been slightly refined to make attacking an enemy a little more brutal.
Still think you're tough?
No, don't expect much fishing gameplay in this review because I'm not a fan of endlessly rotating the analog stick. I'm worried that I'll wear it over time, so there are a few little differences to the mechanics. And combining the smooth movement, the ragdoll physics, my god, the ragdoll physics are so good in this game, and being able to pick off a wave of enemies in a jiffy thanks to the Deadeye is so satisfying. Forgot how much I loved it in the predecessor. There's always an excuse for a cool looking shot even during gameplay.
This is the only way! See? Trust me! Trust you!
You sure you got the lungs for this, Morgan?
Shut the hell up! Why is it every job I do with you ends in a pile of dead bodies?
Since when did you have a problem killing O'Driscolls?
You've got a point.
However, when I went back to that game while writing the script, the gameplay speed literally felt twice as fast and robotic. God, it was weird. Don't get me wrong, it still plays really well even a decade later, but once you get used to one game, the other suddenly feels a lot different even though button commands and the environments are very similar. I wonder how many times I've been through this scenario. Because you're running with a gang, you'll be visiting a lot of post offices to clear up bounty, which works the same way as the first Red Dead Redemption. Committing crimes will reduce your honor and attract sheriffs and officers, and you need to stay out of their sights. However, you're left with a price on your head which you can either pay back or give it to the bounty hunters.
$5,000 for your head alone.
Can I turn myself in?
I always found it strange that you could get in trouble for hurling insults. I mean, doesn't a wanted poster of Arthur titled "Disturbing the Peace $15 reward" sound ridiculous to you?
What are you doing? I will fight you if I have to.
So get out of here while you still can.
Pour l'amour de...
What's your...
Yeah, not much has changed. But because this will pop up more often during missions, unlike the first RDR where if you wanted to, you can only get in trouble once during a tutorial explaining how it works, unless you have a manual save file prepared, or the main goal in the narrative is to be the worst human being imaginable, it's honestly not worth the hassle because of how much it costs to keep it in check.
Just remember, keep a low profile.
Will you remember that, though, Arthur?
Probably not.
Now, I don't know if it's the increasing graphical firepower or the infinite number of moments and conversations that can be triggered on command, but I want to talk about the morality system again, which allows you to go to the extreme on either the good or bad side. I've already explained how it affects the ending, cutscene dialogue, the animal during chapter transitions, but that's not the end of it. As you'd expect for a map like this, there are loads of activities and encounters to explore, at the camp, in town, even in the middle of nowhere, and should be familiar to most long-time Rockstar players. But since a majority of them spent countless hours of doing something on the lines of this, the developers have slowly polished all the little aspects on their maps to encourage players to find other things to do as well. In Red Dead Redemption 2, these include table minigames, shows, random encounters, strangers, clearing gang hideouts, bounty hunting, animal hunting, collectibles, and nearly 100 challenges. And like most Rockstar games, you'll do most of these at least once throughout the story. Yet you don't need to do every single thing to reach 100%. There wasn't as many as I was initially expecting, but then again, the main story missions which take over 40 hours to complete them all more than makes up for it. So what they did here is omit the ones people would enjoy the least, like Liar's Dice, provide a good balance between the serious and humorous. I mean, just look at these characters compared to the ones you hang out at the camp. It's like two alternate universes. And create a setup that's basically judging which side of the moral scale you choose, because it's the options you have that make the game feel more diverse than any other in the genre. You can be bad on a scale where you're a jerk who insults civilians, heckling performers at shows, freeing criminals, to actions that simply leave your jaw dropped, thanks to the increased realism of the physics.
Do I look like I should entertain children? No.
Or you could be good, helping people, donating to the poor, to the camp. Therefore, you'll be spoken of in lots of different positive ways and receive discounts in stores. Point is, there are advantages and disadvantages to both sides.
You're a great man, Arthur Morgan. The kind of young whippersnapper can really admire.
Oh, shut up.
Though I find it strange that you get moral points for stopping bad guys stealing and killing innocent people, those kinds of random events, yet the whole story you're robbing wagons, trains and banks. Isn't that hypocritical of Arthur?
If it's business, well, business is business.
Nonetheless, it further adds to the freedom of an open world game. Whatever you consider fun, you do.
This is...
But that's not the most controversial aspect of this game. Despite the universal acclaim, one thing it always gets called out for is how slow and tedious everything is. You might have noticed hints of that during this review. How fluent the animations are, that chores are pointless, and the gameplay speed feeling twice as fast if you go back to the predecessor. It clearly treads the line between video game and simulation, which reminds me of another certain Rockstar title that came out over a decade ago. Now, in a typical video game, you pick up an item, change equipment, reload, the most basic of actions. Most of the time it's instantaneous, no delays. It's something you never think about when playing a video game. But Red Dead Redemption 2 is different. It has over 300,000 unique animations and the developers aim to make each one feel as high quality as possible. However, general human movement is slower than video game movement, which means the most basic of actions take noticeably longer to perform. Like when picking things up, Arthur has to reach and grab. When browsing for items, weapons, outfits, etc., he has to flip through the pages. Or whenever you're in inside a building or around the camp, you can't even jog. Just little things like that which honestly feel unnecessary and potentially make the total playthrough at least an hour longer than it should be. It's just an estimation, but you get what I'm trying to say. And because the map isn't loaded with towns and horses aren't as fast as cars, it feels like half the game is just horse riding. Obviously, you have other ways to reach certain destinations instantly with public transport in every town and a fast travel feature at the camp. But another thing I noticed when exploring New Austin was the size of it being bigger than the predecessor, the same way an image file was being reshaped. In fact, I compared the time it took to ride from Beach's Hope to Tumbleweed without interruptions, and the gap between these two games is over 2.5 minutes. And because there isn't as much to do here, it felt more like a waste of time than a trip through memory lane. And it's a relief this game looks as stunning as it does to keep you occupied. It seems like the developer's intentions to be realistic does affect the fun factor, and it makes the whole thing feel too laborious for some players to handle. I think it's because we've become so used to open world games giving you the option to go guns blazing from the start. It was always something the Rockstar developers boasted about in the early 2000s, that whenever there's one that takes an hour or two to finally pick up the pace and give you multiple things to do, some are gonna be frustrated or bored to death by that. In fact, what we got in the prologue was the quote tighter version. It was originally meant to be even longer than that. Good lord. There's another reason to have multiple saves.
Why are we doing this? Weather's breaking, we could leave. I thought we was lying low.
But sometimes the fault lies in the player's impatience. Maybe it's because I'm reviewing this game and knowing how long it takes to beat. I admit, I rushed through it a little bit because I didn't want to take too long to make a review for you ladies and gentlemen. And that's not what you're supposed to do. Now I agree the game designers got carried away in certain areas like chores for example. After beating the game it becomes a housekeeping simulator. But when I started to play the game leisurely without recording footage and not thinking about what to say in the review or how to structure it, I was able to open my mind and realize it's not even that complicated. Slow? Yes. It requires patience, player management skills, knowledge of the environment you're exploring, basically becoming Arthur Morgan. But is that supposed to be a bad thing? From my perspective, all they did was add the RPG genre into the mix, and that some players have forgotten that it's set over a century earlier when technology was lacking.
2 of us is all there is, anyhow.
Good, because 2 is all we'll need.
And put yourself in the writer's shoes. You have to choose the type of style and pacing for the prequel early. Do you sacrifice the storytelling that made the first Red Dead Redemption what it is for the Red Dead Revolver route that might make the online aspect a little bit more appealing? Yeah, I think I easily choose the former because it has way more benefits than drawbacks. Seriously, I can't stress enough over how masterfully crafted the map is, how beautiful it looks, and the way the story paces itself with memorable characters, Arthur, John, Sadie, Dutch, everybody. Superb dialogue, long heart-pounding missions, and how it all comes to its conclusion, making every second of gameplay worth it. Perfectly setting the stage as a prequel should, so when you replay the predecessor, everything comes full circle. That was the point when I was like, yep, I'm sold, they did it again. And while the slow pacing might be a polarizing aspect today, it's ultimately what makes Red Dead Redemption 2 the masterpiece it is. And if they did it any other way, it would not be as good. I predict in the future that critics won't be as harsh about that approach.
Guess it was a pleasure.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the best games of the 8th generation. One of the best Rockstar have ever created, and I never thought I'd say this, but exceeds its predecessor. Yet it also elevates it at the same time. Do you know what I mean? It makes replaying Red Dead Redemption 1, that's also a masterpiece on its own, a better experience. I don't know any other follow-up that does that. It feels like not a single shortcut was taken, and I thought it was never going to end. That's the thing with this game, it'll keep you occupied well into the 9th generation, which is handy because for the next few years, all we're gonna get from Rockstar games is a ton of bonus content for Red Dead 2 and Grand Theft Auto 5, since they'll be popular for practically all of eternity. If the announcement and release of these to a 3-year split between each other, then theoretically, it'll be ages before we see another new game from Rockstar. All I see at the moment is a billion pages saying rumors of GTA 6, Bully 2, Midnight Club 5, blah blah blah, which is why I'll be ignoring everything until Rockstar themselves confirm it. I guess we should be grateful that whatever they make nowadays is so big that it's enough to keep us occupied for such a long time, that we don't even need to think about what's next, especially knowing stories behind the scenes. Besides, I've got a lot of other open world games to review in the meantime, but to conclude this absurdly long review, despite its flaws and slow pace, Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the all-time greats of video gaming, and if you put these two together in any order you choose, the whole thing becomes an unforgettable journey that you never want to leave.
Follow me to Chelonia!
Chelonia!